right, welcome back to another episode of Shifting Schools. I'm Jeff Udick, your host here today, and filling in for Trisha, who happens to be away this week. So I had the honor of doing this interview all on my own. And today we're going to be learning from and talking to Elliot Mack, who is a co-founder of Daigon Esports. Those of you that have been listening to our esports mini-series will know that Daigon Esports was one of our sponsors during this mini-series, and we are so appreciative of Daigon and Elliot to step up and to be a sponsor of this. I think this has just been, for myself personally, one of the best mini-series that we've done. It has opened my eyes to so many things around esports that, as a non-gamer myself, I think the last game I played was Duck Hunt. Just a credible learning for myself around this idea of how do we bring student culture into our classroom? And esports is one of those ways that we can do that. And if we're not bringing esports into our schools, then we're missing a segment of our population that we might not be engaging, or we can engage differently. And I think that is doing a disservice to our kids. And so my hope is by the time we finish this up, we're wrapping up this mini series, that we're thinking about, are we engaging all of our students? And are we leaving something on the table by not inviting esports into our schools? Because we have students. We all know we have students who are into esports and gaming. And hopefully throughout this mini series, you've heard and you've learned as much as I have that it's not about the game. It's about the conversations and the community and the skill set that kids are creating by gaming. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about today's interview with Elliot, is really what he talks about is how Daigon Esports got started. And this is what I wrote down, is it's just friendship, passion, conversation, action. You're going to hear today how he formed a friendship through gaming with his co-founder. That friendship through the game then became a passion, and their passion was gaming. And they start to set up their own little leagues over the summer during COVID, and how much gaming meant to Elliot during COVID, where he felt disconnected. You know, he is a third culture kid, so he's grown up in different cultures that are not his own. And, you know, he's stuck in an apartment in Washington, D.C. He can't get out to go be with his parents during COVID. And gaming was a way that he stayed connected with his friends. So it's this friendship and through the passion of gaming that leads to conversations that starts Daigon Esports. And I think that, to me, is just incredible. And, you know, and I'm going to call him a kid because he's a lot younger than me. You know, here's a kid who had a vision, went out and made it work. And if you haven't been over to the Daigon Esports website, I really encourage you to do that. DaigonEsports.com. You can go over there. Again, Elliot, you're going to hear in today's interview, is just so willing to help and support. And if you don't know what your next step is, reach out. It's free to book a call with Elliot and his team, and you could be free to say, I'm a 7th grade ELA teacher. I want to know what my next step is. Can you help me? And that's what they're here to do. And they're here to really just support kids. And that's what I love. That's what I like looking for in sponsors, as well as those that are here to support students. And that's really what this is about, is supporting all kids, regardless of where their passions lie. How do we get those kids engaged to build the skills that we know that they're going to need for the future? So I'm excited for you to hear this interview. I think it's great whenever we get to hear how these ideas come to be. You know, the last part of the words I wrote down was action. He went out, he found some partners, he figured out how to get this started. And him and Eunice end up co-founding this thing and are growing it. And I think it's so great. If you're an international school or international school teacher, please do go visit DaigonEsports.com. And, do us a favor. If you do reach out to them, please let them know that you heard about it on the podcast. Say, hey, I was listening to Shifting Schools and, wanted to reach out, because that just helps them to know how their sponsorship is working as well. So a great interview I love interviewing young people who are doing amazing things. That's really what this comes down to. Young people doing amazing things. And I love supporting them whenever they can. So I love giving them a platform to talk about Daigon Esports and everything that they're doing to support schools, international schools specifically. As a third culture kid, saw a need, saw a gap, and decided to do something about it. So you're going to love this interview. This is Elliot Mack from a co-founder of DaigonEsports.com. Again, thank you to Daigon Esports for being a sponsor of this entire Not So Mini mini-series on esports. So enjoy this episode. And with that, on with the show. All right. Well, Elliot, welcome to the Shifting Schools podcast. It's so great to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited for our conversation.
Thank you. And again, thank you so much to Daigon Esports for being a sponsor of this Not So Mini mini-series. I will tell you, I had, when we started this mini-series, I had no idea, number one, how big the esports industry was. Number two, how passionate people are, specifically around esports in schools. And so our poor little mini series of 4 to 6 has turned into, I think we're at 11 episodes. But thank you so much for Daigon Esports for stepping up and being a sponsor of the podcast. Everyone who's been listening to this knows you've heard the sponsorships throughout. So we really appreciate that. We wanted to give an opportunity because when you and I met for the sponsorship, you have such a great story. And I wanted to make sure that educators got to hear your story of even how this company came to be. And a passion of yours was esports in school. So let's start with that. You're an international student who loves playing esports. Start from there.
Yeah. So really this began, way back in, I guess, high school. So I'm, as you said, international school alumni. Grew up in Brussels and Istanbul. Very much a third culture kid. My dad's American, my mom's French. So very international background, as educators in international schools will be quite familiar with. And so when I was in Istanbul, so I arrived in Istanbul. My school was great, right on the Bosphorus, beautiful. I arrived in Istanbul, and I had this really good friend of mine named Valentine, who he was telling me always about one of his really good friends from his previous school, which was in Copenhagen. So he had come from Copenhagen to Istanbul. I'd come from Brussels to Istanbul. And he was telling me about all his different friends and whatever. And we ended up meeting them one summer, actually, when we ended up all together on vacation in Italy. I think it was kind of as a senior trip or something. And and so we're in Milan, and I meet Eunice, who at the time I had no idea where this was going, but we kind of just met briefly on that trip. I think it was 1 or 2 days. But then we actually connected, as a lot of kids do. We stayed in contact, and we started actually playing video games together. And so we were across. By then, we were kind of like in college, and across continents. I was in the US, he was in Europe, and we started gaming together. And that's really where kind of our friendship really blossomed. And we shared a ton in common because we had lived both in a ton of places. He's Moroccan and Danish, had lived in Morocco, France, and Denmark, similar experiences, and we really connected, and very much so developed a friendship through gaming.
And when you say developed a friendship through gaming, was that like your main form of communication with each other?
Yeah.
Like, did you text message and do all that? Or was it like, the text message was, let's hop in the game. And that's where the friendship formed through the game?
I'd say, yeah. I mean, obviously we also texted, but I'd say that that's what's so beautiful about gaming is that it's, and you'll hear this again and again during this episode, but it's about the game, but it's about so much more than that, right? It's about everything else that happens around it, whether that's for kids and the skills they build, or whether that's for friendships. Like, the game is just a place where we can be and interact and have fun while we talk. And actually, those conversations while we were playing are what led me to be here today, right? Because one of the big conversations we had, and this was during COVID, so this was like a bit later after we'd met, etc. He had actually just visited me in DC, and locked down. I'm all alone, like in an apartment on campus, because I couldn't go home to where my parents lived, couldn't go home. Again, everyone is always like, oh, it's so great, you've moved around everywhere and whatnot. But I think during COVID, a lot of people realized, the limitations and some of the challenges that might come with that. And so I'm alone in this apartment in DC. And, honestly, we were gaming like together every day. And I think it was like such an
Yeah.
important support for me to have. But it also meant that we were talking so much and exchanging so many ideas. And one of those conversations we had was, well, esports is massive. Like at the pro level, it's huge, right?
Yeah.
Like we had just read that like 2 years before that, the League of Legends like finals, which is one of the biggest games in esports, kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, 5 player
Yeah.
versus 5 player in a video game, had like surpassed the Super Bowl in terms of viewership, right? So
Yeah.
massive,
Unbelievable,
right?
right?
You have like $40 million prizes
Yeah,
pools for
right.
like some of the biggest esports tournaments, in like Dota 2, which is another kind of similar game. And so we're here and we're like, well, esports is so massive, especially during COVID. Everybody was starting to kind of like see that. And we're like,
Mm.
we love playing together. We were also playing with some other friends, and it was such a great way for us to connect and whatever. We were like, and we were part of the same network of schools growing up. And we're like, how fun would it have been if when we were in school, my group of friends, including Valentine, who had introduced us, was playing against their group of friends, the one that we had met in Italy, right, that summer. And we had actually played a football, like soccer game that summer. And that
Yeah.
was a lot of fun. We were like, what if we were just doing that, every week and playing? And so we started just like kind of fantasizing about what that would have been like. And, from there, we both kind of were really um, passionate about entrepreneurship, and we just kind of one thing led to another, and we started doing it together. And so we really were on a mission to bring this back to who we were, and that is really kind of our dream. And yeah, so that's really how it all started. And then along the way, we kind of met David and Gary, who had previously founded a activities management platform and worked with over 500 international schools for like 10 years and have a ton of experience. And so we really kind of teamed up with them to make sure that we could kind of execute on that dream and on that vision. And so yeah, now we're really excited to start bringing esports to international schools and kind of helping them empower their students and unlock a new world of opportunities, which I'm sure we'll discuss more.
Yeah, well, it's just such a great story, and I think this is it. You bring up the pandemic and how I think you're right. I think esports and just gaming for a lot of students was a way to connect or stay connected with your friends and friendship groups, and and we did see a large explosion during that and coming out. Can kind of reflect on this last year. We're recording this in July. We're just done with the 2022-23 school year. Talk a little bit about what this year was for Daigon Esports. What are some of the things that you saw growth in, and some of the things maybe around leagues that you were able to hold? What did this past year look like for you as a company?
Yeah, so I think that this past year was really great because we talked to like a ton of schools, and I think that we had the opportunity to kind of like pilot out our leagues and our after school
Mm-hmm.
club, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. And at the same time as well, talk to a bunch of schools who were really, really excited about this. And I think that, it's really helped us kind of like put our purpose out there. And I feel like schools are now starting, we've started to hear from schools that have heard from other schools about, kind of what our mission and purpose is. And I think that, we've really managed to kind of express and have our mission come across of helping international schools make the most of their students' passion for video games. And so I think that, that has been kind of like, it's kind of like the ignition
Sure.
is there. And we've had some great stories from our pilot leagues and from our school visits that I'm sure I'll get to share. But yeah, I think that been the most exciting is schools understanding that there is a passion here from their students, right? Like this is
Yeah.
about meeting students where they are. Like the reason I'm here is because not only because I play video games, it's because 90% of teens play video games, right?
Yeah. Right.
And so yeah, I think that schools have really, we've been really, I think the highlight of this year is how school, especially school heads, have understood that this is really like just another hook, right? In the same way that arts
Yeah,
can be a hook, in the same way that sports can be a
sure.
hook, this is just another hook that they have so many students that are interested in, especially sometimes students that are harder to reach with these other more traditional hooks, and that this can be such a
Right.
great tool for kind of inclusion and for really just empowering their students through a passion of theirs. And I think that if I just said that, right, do you want to empower your students through one of their passions? Then, everybody would say
Who's
yes.
going to say no?
Exactly. Every educator says
Yeah.
yes. And I think that they've now started to realize, like, oh, yeah, there are so many benefits here. And yeah, so I'd say that's really been the highlight.
Yeah. And I think I love that. And I think, one of the things we talk about a lot on the podcast is how do we invite student culture into our schools? And this is just one of those ways, right? For better or for worse. And you don't have to understand all the ins and outs of esports or the hot game of the moment, but you do have to understand that for a lot of for a lot of our students, gaming, esports gaming or computer gaming is something that they're into. And so how do we use it as a hook in our schools? And I think there's a really wide gap that I'm hoping that through this mini series, there's a really wide gap for me between the teacher who is saying, get off your computer, you're spending too much time gaming, and the opposite end of every kid's got to be a gamer, which I don't believe, right? But in between there is just this idea that if I'm a teacher and kids are in my classroom talking about gaming, that I'm not shutting down those conversations, right? I'm finding ways to appreciate all of the, for lack of a better word, soft skills that kids are creating, that I can appreciate that this is part of their culture. And it's in that middle ground of not saying every kid or every school has to have, a top elite esports league, but also making sure we're getting away from this idea of I want kids off computers. There's no good things that are going to happen through these games, the opposite end of that. And I think it's that middle ground that is where we as educators need to be when we're inviting student culture into our classroom. And one of the things I love that you are doing is you are creating all these different pathways for schools to get involved. You've mentioned it a couple times, and this is where I'd like to start with some of your products, is your after school club. The things that I've read about your after school esporting club is, to me, one of the great things that I think you could bring into a school pretty easily. Can you talk a little bit more about your after school club product?
Yeah, definitely. Well, so, I think that the core of it is really to transform students from players into creators, right? So take those students that are really passionate about playing and allow them to develop kind of a wide variety of, key 21st century skills, whether that be coding, troubleshooting, creating, innovating, thinking critically, and do that all through their interest for video games, right? So use that as the hook, the pathway, but really kind of expand their worldview. And as you said, it's a really easy way to get started because we provide all the content. All the school needs to do is have a teacher there that can oversee and supervise the students. They get to get upskilled.
You just need a computer lab, right? Is it usually a computer lab or?
The teacher can get upskilled with the students and start realizing some of the potential of this and, why this might be so empowering. And and we really put the students on a pathway from, exploring video games, exploring the history of video games, starting to build kind of some mini games and some mini monuments and build challenges in Minecraft, exploring taking that further into how do you build a map in Minecraft? How do you add code to that map to make it interactive? For the middle school students, it's pretty quickly going into Roblox game design, right? So understanding how do you start designing games for other people to play. And I think that at the core of it lies also this feeling of empowerment that I think is so important, especially in the 21st century already, but especially with AI, it's becoming just more and more important of owning, being able to own and build something just really changes, I think, your worldview. Going from and whether you're a painter or an artist, whatever it might be, the ability to go from nothing and create something kind of out of thin air, right? That you built, that's yours, is such a great feeling and so important. And I think that, for kids passionate about video games, there's such a wide range of things that they could be doing. and learning all these skills to start building. So that's really the way we do it. I mean, as you said, it's really easy on school's own schedules, weekly sessions. We provide kind of a closed, secure platform where the students just log in, go through the session every week. It's modular, 6 to 12 weeks, depending on school's needs. And yeah, I mean, the vision for there as well is to ideally, start connecting also the international school network, and kind of having a community of internationally minded, gamers and builders that, we could even have a repository of like published games by our students that other students can try out, et cetera,
that's
et cetera.
cool.
So that's kind of where we're going with that as well. But I mean, yeah, it's really about giving an opportunity for the students to start building skills through their passion.
What age is this curriculum for? Like, do you go all the way down to kindergarten, or is it like third grade up, or where?
Yeah, so it's made. We have like an under 12 and kind of over 12.
Okay.
We have two kind of pathways, depending on how schools feel about their students, their population. But we've had it with kind of kids in the last 2 years of elementary school, so like ages 9 to 11, basically, and then ages kind of 12 and up. But honestly, yeah, it could start as young as like 7 or 8, depending on school interest.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a great way for schools to get involved. And again, if you head over to Daigon Esports, you can book a free 30-minute call with Elliot and the team, and they'll help you get started with it. But I do think it's such a great way. And, you touched on this as a third culture kid as well, is one of the things about being an international student and being a third culture kid is you do move a lot. I mean, a lot of kids don't, very rarely in the international world do kids, K through 12 at the same school. And I think finding programs like this where, if I move from Turkey to Brussels and I know that they have an esports program because maybe I was in competition with them, I already have an in. I might even already know some of those students when I move to that school because we were playing in some kind of league game. And I'm thinking more of like middle school, high school. Can you talk about maybe some of those connections that you've seen and the league aspect that you guys also
definitely provide? So actually one of our coaches at one of the international schools in Sofia, Bulgaria, actually shared a story with me where he was telling me how they already have kind of a really good club culture, and they've been really one of like our most advanced schools in a lot of ways, and students are so great. We're working with them on different projects, and it's really great cool stuff going there. The coach is absolutely amazing, and he shared with me how like because they've played against other schools, kind of for example, one school in Poland in Krakow, during sports meets. He had some of his esports students who were also, on the sports team or whatever, that like knew some of the players because they had played together virtually, right? In the esports competition. Cool. So, it's definitely like you'll have those competitions going. I think that, really the goal with us with the esports competitions is to provide essentially, help schools provide their students who are passionate about esports with a space to kind of belong and be celebrated and shine while representing their schools against other schools, right? And so it's pretty straightforward. It's 7 to 9 week long competitions, 3 turns in the year, and every week, your school will be competing against another school. So yeah, and again, here the vision is to connect the international school network and kind of create that global community. And, down the line, we're looking forward to having kind of, our world championships for esports, and hopefully have kind of a ranking of, as many international schools as possible. And I think it's quite unique because in the international school space, and, all international educators will know this, you go to the same conferences, you move around schools. Yeah. There's kind of this like, invisible network, right? Of teachers, educators, schools, and esports really provides a unique kind of platform to really connect all these schools together in kind of one space, right? Even if that's just through like a ranking or through a yearly competition. Right, yeah. So we're really excited about the prospects of that as well.
Yeah. And you're right. There is this very unique, it's really hard to explain to people who haven't been in international schools, the connectedness that you feel. And it really is a small, as big as it is, it's a pretty small community. Somebody knows somebody who worked with somebody
Exactly.
or had a student of somebody at some point.
Exactly.
It's amazing how quick that goes. You have a fairly new product called the Q, where you were saying that, it's a safe place for students in international schools to play, engage, and socialize. Can you maybe talk a little bit about um, the new Q
Yeah, definitely.
offering that you're
Yeah,
doing
so
here?
we're still kind of like testing that out, and honestly, we're waiting kind of to hit a critical mass of schools where this makes more sense. But the idea is just to provide a safe space for students, right? I think the biggest fear from any parent is having their kids play and they don't know with who they're playing and they're playing with strangers online, right?
Right. Yeah.
So the idea here is that we're able to provide students with kind of reliable, it's basically recreating Eunice and I's story, right? Trying to create those friendships
Yeah.
globally. So providing kind of a safe space um, for students to connect kind of outside of the competition. But we're still very much developing that because we want it to be safe. We want it to be really a safe space, and we want to be doing that incrementally to make sure that it becomes really a safe space and can be really a safe space. And we have a lot of plans on mechanisms on how we can help make it a safe space and help with like monitoring and a lot of different things. But so we're still very much like at the early days of that. But again, it's part of that broader vision of connecting the international kind of school network of saying like, if you're passionate about something and you can meet someone from, another country in your
Yeah.
continent, whatever it might be, who might be going through the same exact exams, the same exact, and
Yeah.
may share a
Right.
lot of passions, right? It's kind of being able to find community more widely and essentially really engage in global citizenship through esports for these students. So that's kind of the broader vision, but we're still very much developing that. And right now, our biggest focus is really getting, kind of expanding our international school competitions as well as our gaming after school club for schools. And then once we feel like we're in a good space for that, we'll be releasing kind of, scaling up in terms of the numbers of schools we open this up to. So yeah.
How many schools did you have take place in the competitions last year? How many different international schools? Did you have different leagues running around the world?
Last year we actually only had a league in Europe. So we're really excited to be launching multiple leagues within Europe and then also leagues in the Middle East and Asia this fall. So we're quite excited to kind of expand and
That's great.
And we're definitely excited to have more schools join. I think that again, as I said, the quicker and the closer we get to this goal of having this kind of like international school global ranking, the happier and the closer to the
Well, yeah, and I can just see, you're going to have your regional tournaments, and then the winners of regional tournaments are going to go on to play other regions.
Right,
I mean, this is a whole thing. I mean, that's how the international world works via regions anyway. So I think that's great. The last thing I want to talk about, and I think maybe it's the most important for teachers, is you also have a product called The Launch, where you really help educators and schools understand and support them in setting this up for their school. And I think, for anybody who's listening to this, if you're, you've listened to all 11 episodes of this mini series and you're starting to say, okay, I see this, I want to bring this to my kids. How do I get support in setting this up? That's really what the Launch product is. Can you talk a little bit about how you support schools and even a coach or a teacher who's like, I want to do this for our kids? Well, what do I do?
Yeah, so I guess the Launch is really like kind of, there's multiple pieces to it. I think the first is, we love having conversations with schools and helping. And, that's what I spend all my days doing, is talking to educators about how they can get started. So the first is, really like I'd say if that's your position, reach out, send me an email, book a call, and we'll get you started. The Launch really is just like kind of a repository of a lot of the kind of summarized articles that kind of summarize the literature around esports. So it's really to help you better understand, what pro esports are, kind of what's happening in schools, what's the peer-reviewed research behind this, right? Like, and I know you've had a few researchers on the show.
Yeah,
so like
as part of the mini,
exactly on the mini series. So, what does the literature say? And just essentially, exactly how to get started, what this can lead to, whether that's future careers, college scholarships, kind of what the landscape is, and to help, teachers better grasp that. When, and also kind of as a next step, as I said, so there's kind of like the call, there's this repository of articles, and then there's just kind of our documentation for getting started once you're kind of ready to go. And, we have that all ready for schools in terms of like, okay, how do I evaluate my current hardware? What are my options in terms of like scaling up my hardware solutions or improving them? And based on where you are, there's very different solutions and challenges that may arise. So just like, how do I get from 0 to 1 in terms of setting this up? A call, access to kind of our database of resources, and then, once you're ready, kind of all the supporting literature you'll need to get started. But it's quite easy, honestly, for most schools with the current setup that they have. And we've purposefully picked, so we're running chess, Minecraft Capture the Flag, FIFA 23, and Rocket League. And we've purposely picked these games because some, like chess, require very, very, very little tech setup. Minecraft is similar. It's very light to run. And then obviously as you get into Rocket League and then FIFA, it's a bit has a bit heavier tech requirements, but we've done it purposefully so that any school can get involved.
I love that because, to your point, a lot of schools now have gone 1-to-1. And so every kid's got a laptop, and I can see schools saying, but we don't have the funds, or we just gave every kid a laptop. We're not going to go, build a gaming center with these high-end gaming devices, which is all you hear about. But you don't necessarily need that nowadays. I mean, a lot of these platforms have become so good at being able to really, take the tech requirement into consideration. I think Minecraft is a great example. I mean, it's all web-based now. You can, I think can you play it on a Chromebook? I think you can play Minecraft on a Chromebook now.
You can even play on an iPad.
So I mean, that you can. So you've got some great ways to get kids into this. I love that Minecraft Capture the Flag. What a great introduction to esports and using a platform that everyone knows. But well, thank you so much for being here and talking about Daigon Esports. Again, if you are an international school listener and you're looking to, maybe bring this into your school, or you just want to have further conversations, or maybe you need to go grab your principal or your superintendent and say, we're going to book a call with Elliot so you can sit down and understand why we need this after school club, or understand where our kids are and how do we support some of our gamers that we might have in our school in creating these connections. And to your point, and I think hopefully people have heard throughout this mini series, all these other skills. When we talk about gaming, we're not actually, the game is just the platform. As you said it so well. It's just the platform to engage kids in other things, becoming creators, learning how to code. We have one of the people that came on, talked about all the other skills behind, being a live Twitch streamer and being able to do the audio behind the stream. Like there's all these other jobs that are more than just playing the game. And I think that is it, right? The game is the hook to everything else that we do. And we're always looking for ways to hook in students' passion into our school. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate everything that you're doing. Again, that's DaigonEsports.com. You can go over there and there's a little inquire now button at the top. You can book your 30-minute or email Elliot and the team. Again, small team of all internationally minded people. I love that these are international. You were an international student, and now you're back supporting the community that you went through in so many different ways. So, Elliot, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being a sponsor of our mini series. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for bringing attention to such a great opportunities for schools and frankly for empowering students. And again, I'm always happy for having any conversation, even if it's just pure interest, even if you're not the decision maker, even if all of that, if just interested educators that want to chat, learn more, share ideas, anything. So don't hesitate and feel free to send me an email or book the time to chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Elliot. Appreciate it.
Take care.